It began in 1817, in the quiet farmland of Robertson County, Tennessee. John Bell had moved his family there to build a new life in the peaceful countryside. Their home sat at the edge of the woods, the kind of place where the nights were silent enough that you could hear the crickets breathe. But that silence didn't last long. At first it was small things, scratching inside the walls, footsteps across the wooden floor when the family was supposed to be asleep. John brushed it off, blaming rats or the shifting of old timbers. But when his children started waking up in the middle of the night, screaming that something was tugging at their sheets, he knew this was no ordinary house sound. The disturbances grew darker. Invisible hands slapped the children across the face. Hair was pulled so violently that clumps came out. The family began to hear a woman's voice, low, mocking, sometimes singing, other times cackling from the shadows. Neighbors were called in and even they witnessed it. Furniture shaking, dishes flying across the room, doors slamming without wind. People began whispering about a curse, and they gave it a name: the Bell Witch. The entity seemed to fixate on John himself. He would feel pressure on his chest at night, as if something was trying to smother him. He grew sickly, trembling with violent seizures. During one of his episodes, the voice of the witch echoed through the house, announcing, "I will kill John Bell." The family lived in constant dread. Imagine being a child, trying to sleep while hearing laughter from the corner of your room. Laughter from a mouth that wasn't there. Imagine walking through the woods and feeling an icy hand close around yours, only to turn and find nothing. That was the Bell family's reality. In December of 1820, John Bell was found unresponsive in his bed. Beside him was a small vial of black liquid. The witch's voice rang out in triumph. "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night, which fixed him." John Bell was dead. And just like that, the terror quieted. The attacks lessened and eventually they stopped. But the land never forgot. To this day, locals swear the Bell Witch still roams those Tennessee woods. Visitors claim to hear whispers when they stand near the old Bell property. Some say they felt their clothes tugged or their hair pulled as they walked the trails. The laughter, faint but unmistakable, still drifts through the trees on certain nights. The Bell Witch didn't just haunt a family. She left behind a story that refuses to die, a reminder that in the Appalachian woods some spirits are never at rest. It was a warm September evening in 1952, in the small town of Flatwoods, West Virginia, the kind of quiet Appalachian town where everybody knew everybody, and life moved at its own slow pace. That night, a group of local boys were playing football on a field when something tore across the sky. A glowing, fiery object that streaked overhead and disappeared into the woods on the hill. The boys froze, staring in shock, their game instantly forgotten. For a moment, there was silence. Then they bolted. One of the boys, Eddie May, shouted, "Did you see that? It landed on Bailey's farm." Their hearts pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. They ran into town, grabbing a few more people, including Eddie's mother. With flashlights in hand, the group made their way up the hill, their breath quick in the cool night air. The woods felt wrong. Still. Too still. Not even the crickets sang. The closer they got, the heavier the air became, thick with a strange metallic smell that burned their throats. One boy gagged, coughing violently, and the others felt their skin prickle like it was on fire. Then they saw it. At the edge of the clearing stood something towering, nearly 10 feet tall. Its head was spade-shaped, glowing from within, with two piercing red eyes that burned like hot coals. Its body seemed metallic, almost robotic, with long claw-like hands dangling at its sides. And then it hissed, a shrill mechanical sound that sliced through the night. The children screamed. One dropped his flashlight, the beam catching the creature's body, making it shimmer like polished steel. The air became suffocating. One of the boys stumbled, clutching his chest, saying he couldn't breathe. Eddie's mother grabbed him by the arm and yelled, "Run! Don't look back!" The group fled down the hill, stumbling over roots and rocks, their flashlights bouncing wildly. Behind them, the hissing grew louder, then suddenly stopped. When they finally reached the bottom of the hill, gasping for breath, they realized the night had gone completely silent again. Back in town, the boys were pale, shaking uncontrollably. Some of them vomited. A few even fainted. The smell, that sickening metallic odor, clung to their clothes. Local authorities went back up to investigate, but when they reached the clearing, the monster was gone. All that remained was a strange burnt patch of earth and a lingering mist that made their eyes water. Over the following days, the witnesses suffered nausea, throat irritation, and violent headaches. Doctors couldn't explain it. Some called it hysteria. Others whispered it was radiation. But the families knew what they saw. The story spread quickly, and the Flatwoods monster became legend. But for those who were there, it wasn't just a story. It was a nightmare they carried for the rest of their lives. Even now, people in Flatwoods say strange lights sometimes appear in the night sky. Hikers claim to hear that same shrill hiss echoing through the trees, and some say they've seen glowing red eyes watching from the woods. Whatever landed on that hill in 1952, it was real enough to leave scars. And real enough that the people of Flatwoods never walked their woods the same way again. November of 1966, in the small Appalachian town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a quiet river town tucked between wooded hills and winding back roads. The kind of place where life slowed after sundown, where the only sounds were the rush of the Ohio River and the hum of crickets in the fields. But on one cold night, everything changed. Two young couples were driving outside of town, near an old abandoned TNT plant, a sprawling complex of crumbling concrete and overgrown storage bunkers left from World War II. The road was empty, their headlights cutting through the fog. That's when they saw it. Standing in the beam of their headlights was something massive. A figure, easily 7 feet tall, with wings folded tightly against its body. Its skin looked gray, almost leathery, and then they saw the eyes. Two glowing, blood-red eyes that pierced the night, brighter than taillights, staring directly at them. The couples froze. Their car slowed to a crawl, and then the creature unfurled its wings. With a deafening flap, it rose into the air, keeping pace with the car as they sped away in panic. It swooped low over the roof, its shadow swallowing the road. The couple screamed, tears in their eyes, their hands gripping the dashboard as the driver floored the gas pedal. But no matter how fast they went, the thing stayed with them, gliding effortlessly through the air, eyes locked on its prey. Finally, after miles of sheer terror, the creature veered off into the woods and vanished. The couples drove straight into town, pale and trembling, telling anyone who would listen what they saw. But they weren't the only ones. Over the next year, dozens of people reported encounters with the creature that came to be called the Mothman. Couples parked on Lover's Lane saw it crouching on rooftops. A man walking his dog swore it snatched the animal into the night. Others said they heard a terrible high-pitched screech echoing across the fields before the glowing red eyes appeared. Point Pleasant lived in fear. People stopped driving at night. Hunters refused to go into the woods. Families locked their doors and kept their curtains drawn. The town felt cursed. And then, tragedy struck. On December 15, 1967, just over a year after the first sighting, the Silver Bridge, the main connection between Point Pleasant and Ohio, suddenly collapsed during rush hour traffic. 46 people plunged into the freezing water below. It was one of the worst disasters the town had ever seen. In the chaos, some survivors swore they saw the creature one last time, perched silently on the riverbank, its glowing eyes fixed on the wreckage as if it had been waiting for this moment. Since then, the Mothman has been remembered not just as a monster, but as a harbinger of doom. Some believe it caused the bridge collapse. Others believe it came to warn the town of the tragedy. Even today, people traveling through Point Pleasant report strange sightings, red eyes glimmering in the trees, dark shapes flying over the river, a shadow with wings bigger than a man's body, watching from the edge of the forest. Whether it was an omen, a curse, or something else entirely, one thing is certain: when the Mothman appears, something terrible always follows. In the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, there's a ridge called Brown Mountain. By day, it looks like any other stretch of Appalachia, endless rolling hills, thick trees, and winding trails. But when the sun sets and the forest goes still, the mountain comes alive with something no one has ever been able to explain. The locals call them the Brown Mountain Lights. The first recorded sighting was more than 100 years ago, but the Cherokee spoke of them long before that. To them, the lights were spirits, the souls of women wandering the mountain, still searching for warriors who never came home from battle. Others said they were the restless dead, murdered travelers carrying their ghostly lanterns through the dark. The lights appear without warning. Some describe them as soft glowing orbs that float just above the tree line. Others swear they've seen blinding fiery spheres racing across the sky before vanishing in silence. One story comes from a hunter in the 1920s. He was camping near the mountain when a pale, flickering light appeared in the distance. At first, he thought it was another traveler carrying a lantern. But the longer he watched, the more he realized the light wasn't moving like a person. It hovered, bobbing in and out of the trees, growing brighter. Curious, he followed it into the woods. The deeper he went, the more lights appeared, circling him, pulsing as though alive. His chest tightened, his breath quickened. The air felt heavy, suffocating, like the mountain itself was pressing in on him. Suddenly, the light closest to him flared white-hot and went out. He fell to his knees, blinded, the woods spinning around him. When his vision returned, the lights were gone. He staggered back to camp, shaken and pale. For the rest of his life, he swore the mountain had tried to lure him in, and he barely escaped. Others haven't been so lucky. Hikers have vanished without a trace after chasing the lights. Entire search parties have claimed to see glowing spheres drifting ahead of them, as if leading them deeper into the forest, only for the lights to disappear, leaving them disoriented and lost. Even scientists have tried to explain it. Some say it's swamp gas, others claim it's headlights from distant cars. But the lights were reported long before cars ever existed, and no one can explain why they appear so suddenly, why they move against the wind, or why they seem to follow people. To this day, people still travel to Brown Mountain hoping to see them, and many do. Some are lucky enough to catch a glimpse from a safe distance. Others aren't so fortunate. Because there's one detail that nearly every witness agrees on. Once you see the lights, they see you too. And if you follow them into the woods, you might never come back. In the dark hollows of Appalachia, hunters and old-timers whisper about a creature most folks laugh off as folklore. But in the stillness of the mountains, when the woods turn black and the air feels heavy, the stories don't sound funny at all. They sound like a warning. They call it the Wampus Cat. The legend comes from Cherokee tales. A woman, curious about the men's secret rituals, disguised herself in the pelt of a mountain lion to spy on them. But when she was caught, she was cursed, doomed to roam the forests forever, half woman, half beast. Her spirit twisted into something demonic, something that feeds on fear. For generations, people in the Appalachians have claimed to see it. A hulking, cat-like figure with glowing yellow eyes, and a scream that sounds like both a woman's cry and a panther's roar. But the Wampus Cat doesn't just appear anywhere. It waits until you're alone. One story comes from a coal miner in the 1920s. He lived in a cabin at the edge of the forest, a place so isolated he could go weeks without seeing another soul. One winter night, he was woken by scratching at his window. When he lit his lantern, nothing was there, just the empty woods. But in the snow beneath the window, he saw paw prints, far too large to be any mountain lion. That night, he heard it for the first time, a shrill, guttural scream that echoed through the trees, rattling his chest. He bolted the door, sat by the fire with his shotgun, and waited. The sound came closer. The screaming turned into a growl. Then came the heavy thump of claws against his door. He swore the wood bent inward, like something was testing its strength. Hours later, it stopped. But when he stepped outside at dawn, the snow was shredded with prints circling his cabin. Prints that started at the tree line, but never went back. Decades later, hunters still tell stories. Men out in the woods after dark have returned pale and shaken, claiming something stalked them silently, always just beyond the beam of their flashlights. Campers say their fires were circled at night, glowing eyes reflecting from the brush. One man swore he saw it step into the clearing, a massive, cat-like figure with a face that looked almost human. The Wampus cat doesn't leave tracks you can follow. It leaves a feeling, a suffocating awareness that you're not alone no matter how empty the forest seems. And if you hear that scream, half woman, half beast, it means the Wampus cat is already hunting you. Tucked deep in the hollows of Clay County, West Virginia, there's a place with a name that makes people shiver even before they know the story: Booger Hole. The name itself comes from the old Appalachian word booger, meaning ghost or evil spirit. And in this tiny, isolated community, people believed evil lived among them. In the early 1900s, strange things began to happen in Booger Hole. Livestock turned up dead, crops withered for no reason, and people whispered about curses. At the center of it all was an old woman named Grandma Thorne. She lived alone in a sagging cabin at the edge of the woods, her face hidden beneath a black shawl. Locals called her a witch. Horses grew sick after she touched their bridles. Children woke screaming, claiming an old woman sat on their chests at night, stealing their breath. Neighbors avoided her, crossing themselves when she shuffled down the dirt road. But no one dared to confront her until it was too late. One winter night in 1917, a gunshot echoed through the hollow. When neighbors rushed to Grandma Thorne's cabin, they found her slumped in her rocking chair, a bullet through the window and into her chest. Her shawl was soaked in blood, her mouth twisted into a final grin. The neighbors said she cursed the town with her dying breath, and almost immediately, the curse took hold. Horses dropped dead in their stalls for no reason. Barns caught fire without explanation, flames devouring everything in minutes. Men began to vanish, their bodies later found mutilated in the woods. Families claimed to see Grandma Thorne's shadow moving across their walls at night. A farmer swore he woke to find her face inches from his own, pale, sunken, her eyes black as coal, only for her to vanish when he screamed. Fear consumed the town. Booger Hole became a place people whispered about, but never visited after dark. Outsiders avoided it too, muttering about the curse that clung to the valley. Even decades later, locals refused to build houses there. To this day, the legend remains. Travelers who pass through at night say the air feels heavier in Booger Hole. Some claim to hear footsteps behind them on the empty road or see an old woman's figure at the tree line watching. And a few unlucky ones have reported waking in the middle of the night, choking, unable to breathe, as if someone invisible was pressing down on their chest. Grandma Thorne may have died a century ago, but her curse never did. In Booger Hole, West Virginia, the witch still waits. In the remote corners of the Appalachian Mountains, where fog clings to the hills and silence feels heavier than sound, there is a legend whispered around firelight: the Bone Lady. She is not just a ghost, not just a woman, but a reminder of what happens when the land itself holds a grudge. The story begins in the late 1800s with a woman named Eliza Keller. She was a midwife, one of the few trusted to deliver babies in the rugged backwoods of Kentucky. But Eliza's life was marked by tragedy. Every child she bore herself was stillborn. 5 tiny graves stood behind her cabin, each marked only with a wooden cross. Locals pitied her at first, until whispers began. They said she'd made a bargain with something dark in the woods, that she had turned from healer to killer, trading innocence for a chance at her own twisted immortality. And when children in the valley began to vanish without a trace, suspicion turned into rage. One autumn night, a mob of frightened men stormed her cabin. They found Eliza hunched over a fire, her hands black with ash, and beside her, a bundle of small, broken bones. The air smelled of burning marrow. Her voice was a rasp as she hissed at them, "These bones are mine, you cannot take them." The mob didn't wait. They dragged her outside and strung her up from an oak tree, leaving her body to sway in the moonlight. But before the rope tightened, she screamed words that froze them all to their core. "I will walk again, and I will wear your bones." From that night on, she was no longer Eliza Keller. She was the Bone Lady. The first sightings came weeks later. Hunters claimed they saw her drifting through the woods, her dress shredded, her fingers long and claw-like, her face hidden beneath a veil of pale hair. But what made them flee in terror was the rattling sound that followed her, the clatter of bones like a necklace jangling with every step. And soon, the deaths began. One by one, members of the mob who killed her turned up dead. A farmer was found with his chest caved in, his ribs missing. A hunter's body was discovered strung up in a tree, his skeleton stripped clean. A boy vanished while walking home from church, and when searchers scoured the woods, they found only his clothes, neatly folded beside a pile of small bones. People swore they could hear her before they saw her. The rattle, rattle, rattle of bones knocking together in the dark. By the time you turned to look, she was already there, her hollow eyes locked onto yours. Even today, locals warn never to wander those woods alone. They say if you hear that faint clattering sound behind you, don't run, don't even breathe, because if the Bone Lady marks you, she won't stop until your bones join her collection. And in the Appalachian night, when the wind whistles low through the trees, it sometimes sounds like laughter, high, thin, and cruel. The laughter of a woman who wears the bones of the damned. In the rolling hills of Pocahontas County, West Virginia, the mountains hold more than beauty. They hold blood. It was the summer of 1980, and two young women, Vicky Durian and Nancy Santomero, hitchhiked their way through Appalachia, drawn by the promise of peace and community at the Rainbow Gathering, a festival for free spirits deep in the woods. They were bright-eyed, adventurous, carrying little more than backpacks and the naive belief that the world was kind. But the mountains are not kind. On a lonely stretch of road near Droop Mountain, their journey ended. A farmer discovered their bodies lying in the grass by a ditch, both shot multiple times at close range. The silence of the valley was broken only by the flies circling in the thick summer air. Locals whispered of danger. Some said it was outsiders, drifters, maybe cult members who had followed the girls. Others muttered about a local man with a violent temper. The town, already isolated, turned in on itself. Suspicion ran hot. Families locked doors they'd never locked before. Mothers clutched their daughters tighter. But there was something stranger, something more haunting. The girls hadn't been robbed. Their belongings were scattered, but nothing of real value was taken. And the brutality of the shootings didn't feel random. It felt personal. And then came the whispers of a third girl. Some say there was another hitchhiker traveling with them that summer, a girl who vanished without a trace. Witnesses claimed they'd seen 3 women on the roadside that day, not 2. Police dismissed it, chalking it up to the chaos of memory. But locals insisted. They swore there had been another, a pale, quiet girl who never gave her name. They began calling her the Third Rainbow Girl. And the chilling part, she was seen again. Over the years, hikers and truckers passing through Droop Mountain claimed to see her. A young woman in faded clothes, walking the roadside alone, always silent, her face turned away. If you slowed down, she would vanish. If you stopped, sometimes she appeared in the back seat of your car, reflected in the rearview mirror with hollow, unblinking eyes. The case itself twisted and turned for decades. Innocent men were accused, reputations destroyed, and the truth seemed to sink deeper into the earth with every passing year. Only in recent years did a clearer story emerge. A local man, steeped in violence, was believed to be responsible. But the mystery of the third girl has never been solved. Was she real? A survivor who disappeared into silence? Or something else? A spirit bound to that mountainside, wandering the roadside where her friends died. Even now, the air feels heavy on Droop Mountain. Drivers lower their voices as they pass the site, some crossing themselves without even thinking. And sometimes, late at night, when the fog curls low across the road, headlights will catch the figure of a lone young woman walking along the ditch. But if you stop to offer her a ride, she won't answer. She'll just look at you with eyes that don't belong to the living. The third rainbow girl may be the most unsettling part of the story, because no one knows if she's flesh and blood or the restless ghost of a murder unsolved.